If we get into a court where OSHA thinks it's going to prevail, they might not be so inclined to dismiss the cases.
You push back on the constitutionality of OSHA's in-house judges. What made you take on that fight? Because that seems like a pretty big fight.
I was saying you're talking about my favorite thing right now. So with the Jarchese decision, and I don't know how familiar you are with that, but that was where Mr. Jarchese was being pursued by the Securities and Exchange Commission, and kind of high level summary of that case for folks that aren't aware. The SEC has the same sort of structure relative to its quote unquote courts relating to SEC issued penalties. And so if they aren't going to pursue a criminal case, they can pursue one of these civil cases using this similar sort of SEC court setup. And Jarchese challenged that and said, look, I should have the right to a trial before a U.S. District Court judge and a jury. And the Supreme Court ultimately agreed with that. The in-house judicial body is the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission. It's structured very similarly to the way the SEC adjudicates these cases when they do the civil adjudication. And, at the end of the day, the Supreme Court has kind of moved things in a direction where these challenges are ripe. And thus far, we've had really good success with them, in as much as OSHA doesn't even want to get to the district court for a hearing on these things. They've just been withdrawing the citations because I think they're afraid that we're going to prevail. And if we prevail, unless Congress acts, OSHA is going to issue citations that it can't do anything with, it can't enforce. And so I've referred to it as kind of the easy button as relates to some of these OSHA cases. And it doesn't seem until we get into the wrong court, if we get into a court where OSHA thinks it's going to prevail, they might not be so inclined to dismiss the cases. But thus far, we've not ended up there. We're on our third, and we're going to be filing our fourth here soon.
That's very fascinating. I can see why that's one of your favorite topics. So is there a case where the facts look terrible for your client at first, but then you found a way out? It's something that you can think of off the top of your head?
Yeah, so we had a case where, well, let me back up. So there's two types of cases. So the one case is the case where you have terrible, terrible facts, but OSHA doesn't do anything. And you kind of sit there and like, hey, look, I'm not gonna look a gift horse in the mouth. Then you have the other cases where you kind of litigate them, and two cases in each side. So the one case was a case in a furniture warehouse where a guy was up about 45 feet in one of these high lift picker type forklifts, and for whatever reason he didn't tie off, and he was found several hours later at the bottom of his picker, deceased as a result of a head injury from the fall. There was plenty of reason for OSHA to issue citations, but the compliance officer and I, in the last case that we had together, went through a deposition where I made it very difficult for the compliance officer, and she did everything she could to find, though I thought we were going to get cited, she did everything she could to find reasons not to cite us. And so we got done with that investigation, no citations issued. And the client was like, yeah, you told us these three things could happen or should happen, and they didn't. Why did they not happen? Were you setting us up? And it's like, no, I think we got the right person. And she just wasn't willing to go through another deposition. And so she wasn't going to find citations. The other case was a case that involved a fall in a wind energy tower. So, everybody's familiar with the big three-bladed windmills. And so I was representing a company that did work with those, and somebody fell from that tower. And we had received citations for various fall protection items. And, we went into the informal conference, and I had zero expectation that OSHA was going to move, but the client had come up with some really brilliant ideas in terms of how to prevent this type of incident from ever happening again. We sat down, we had a wonderful explanation with OSHA. OSHA agreed with us, and they vacated all the citations. So, I mean, it doesn't always end up in a situation where the employer ends up taking the lumps. I mean, sometimes we prevail, and actually more often than not, I think we do prevail.